everyone. I've been wanting to get more into build crafting content, so if that's something you are interested in, let me know down below in the comment section and consider subscribing for that content. I am the type of player that will find one build that can go and do anything, and I will only crutch that build on that character. So I want to break down the build that I have settled on, and there's a couple tweaks that I might make in the future that I'll talk about, but for right now, I'm pretty sure this is what I'm going to be using. So for all my abilities, you know, the pretty standard stuff, I'm of course going to be using the grapple grenade in pretty much all PvE content because it is incredibly fun. And you can go really fast with it, and you can pair it together with some of your abilities to be very powerful as well. It is super powerful for traversal, and you can use it in combination with ensnaring slam to incapacitate some of the most powerful enemies in the entire game. Champions, not a threat anymore because you can just hang them in the air for like 10 seconds and they can't do anything. A lot of tormentors, you can do the same thing. This is a very powerful aspect, and so our goal with this build is going to be to have as much uptime on our grenade and our class ability as possible, because ensnaring slam, what it does is when you're in the air, you can hit your alternate movement button and you will ensnare a bunch of enemies around you, but that does consume your hunter dodge, and so you want to make sure you have your hunter dodge as much as possible, and grapple helps you with mobility and that sort of stuff as well. So that's what this build is focused on, is always making sure you have your grenade and your class ability up. Here are the 4 fragments I've settled on. Thread of the Mind. So whenever you do ensnaring slam, you ensnare enemies, or suspend enemies, excuse me, you get bonus class energy back, so it helps you get your dodge back faster, which is always really good, and you know, just kind of infinite loops a little bit. This is probably the most powerful fragment you can use, is Thread of Generation. Dealing damage to anything, but with anything to anything, generates grenade energy. So if you are thinking to yourself, man, I really could grapple more, use this. I promise, it's so good. Thread of Propagation, this is one I'm a little shaky on. Powered melee final blows grant your strand weapons unraveling rounds. Another thing that this subclass does, or this build that I'm using, really focuses on is kind of Warmind Cells 2.0. So whenever you make enemies unravel and you kill them, they will form and they'll drop what is called a tangle. It's like a little green ball. And when you shoot that tangle, well, you can grapple to it infinitely, which is really nice. But when you shoot it, it will make a very large explosion like Warmind Cells. And so the ad clearing part of this subclass comes from tangles. And so if I use my melee, which I'm not using very often, but I can use it to kill things, I can get unraveling rounds on my Quicksilver Storm, which is actually pretty damn good. And so as I'm killing things with Quicksilver Storm, I'm making tangles, which I can then shoot to clear large groups of enemies. I might switch this out for in the future. I don't have the new exotic hunter helmet yet, but what that does is when you grapple, you get woven mail, and there's another fragment here, Thread of Transmutation. When you have woven mail, final weapon blows create tangles. And so I might end up going that route instead, especially in kind of easier content. But for right now, I have Thread of Propagation. I'm pretty happy with it. And then Thread of Continuity. You suspend, unravel, and sever enemies for longer. And most importantly, unravel so you can make more threadlings. Or tangles rather, and then suspend is something that we really just want enemies to be as suspended for as long of a time as possible. So those are the 4 fragments that I have settled on. I am using Quicksilver Storm. It is, in my opinion, the best strand weapon that you can have right now. But you know, if you really like a strand sniper, or I would probably use this like a double special build. To be honest, I'm not really a fan of the hand cannon. The SMG looks kind of mid. Maybe the new sidearm, I don't have it yet, but these sorts of things. But for right now, Quicksilver Storm, especially with the grenade alternate fire, is very powerful, and I found that it works in the even legend content, which is pretty exciting. I have Forbearance because I never take this thing off, and then whatever heavy I'm using, if I'm running through content, other half for really hard bosses, Cataclysmic, of course, or Hothead. Any of these 3 things slot in perfectly to this build. Now let's talk about mods. So you can see I've got a pretty good build distribution going on. I would, of course, always focus Resilience I would probably do resilience in mobility. I have a really bad pair of Star Eater scales, so this is the build I was able to make. But 10 discipline to always have your grapple, 10 resilience for as much damage resistance as possible, and hopefully your mobility as high as possible so you can constantly be suspending enemies. Important parts here, harmonic siphon. So I am constantly getting kills with my my weapons, my Quicksilver Storm. And so as I get multi-kills with Quicksilver Storm, I will make orbs of power, and that will start generating and feeding into, of course, any armor mods I have. And then I also have Arc Siphon because of Forbearance and Hothead and all the other crazy arc weapons that are in the game right now. So I think these two things always have just constant orb generation. I think that's really important. Then on the arms, we have Bolstering Detonation. This makes it so I get class ability energy back whenever I do damage with my grenade. So if I hit something, if I grapple onto something, I get class ability energy, and then I can then Ensnaring Slam and suspend them. And it's just a nice little loop where we're constantly grappling, suspending, grappling, suspending. I also have Grenade Kickstart. And so this means anytime I have, let's say like I grapple, you can see I have 2 full charges. If I grapple, I get a little bit back. And then just every time I grapple, I will continue to get more and more back. And this is kind of the premise behind infinitely flying. And the more orbs you have, you don't need orbs for it to work, but the more orbs you have, the more efficient that is. And so as you're flying through gameplay, you're really getting that grapple back just so quickly, which is of course good. We also have Focusing Strike, so whenever you do damage with your melee attack, which will hit a lot of enemies and do a lot of damage, you will get more and more class ability energy. So once again, just focusing on the synergy between using class ability or all of your abilities and getting your other ones back. Very powerful combination. I have Concussive Dampener and Solar Resistance, of course, switch the resistance based on what activity you are in. I have Arc Weapon Surge because if I'm going to be doing DPS, it's more than likely going to be with Forbearance and Hothead. This is my only decaying one, so I also have Time Dilation, so my armor decay lasts a little bit longer. So, there is a little bit of, you kind of have to juggle. You have to make sure you're not using your grenades or class abilities going into DPS, so you don't consume those armor charges before Surge can do it. But that's honestly not that, you're not going to be using a grapple in DPS, and you're not going to be usually dodging in DPS, so that doesn't really matter that much either. And then stacks on stacks, so every time you get an orb of power, it gives you 2 armor stacks instead of 1. And so you're really just focusing on using these orbs of power to get your abilities back as much as possible. And then Utility Kickstart, whenever you use your class ability, you gain some back. And so that does work for Ensnaring Slam. So if you see I go up and I dodge, I have about 20% of my class ability back just like that, which makes the cooldown a lot faster. And then kind of the only final part is that I'm using Star Eater scales because you're going to be constantly picking up orbs of light for your mods anyways. This will empower and give you Feast of Light, which will make your super way more powerful when it comes to dealing with bosses. And I have tons of gameplay in the background to show that. This is very good because this means you can have one subclass for just kind of mowing down legions of enemies and traversal and speedrunning, but then you can still do a lot of boss damage when it matters the most. And like I said, I might be shifting this out for the new Exotic Hunter Helm as well. Very happy with pretty much all of the synergy here. So yeah, and then in my artifact, there are only a couple important ones. All armored, this one just makes strand mods cheaper. Multi-siphon mods, that's nice too, but the important ones are Untangler. Destroying a tangle with a strand weapon suspends targets damaged by the explosion. So if I see a tangle and I shoot it, it will then suspend a lot more enemies, which makes this just like I said, Warmind Cell 2.0. It's pretty crazy. We have Allied Unraveling, where rapid final blows with strand weapons grant your weapon with unraveling rounds with a longer duration. Your allies, once again, unraveling rounds makes your enemies they'll form tangles when they die, and that just is just the synergy there. So you'll kill things with, you'll damage things with the tangle, you'll get them weak, you'll finish them off with your weapon, you'll get unraveling rounds, you'll make more tangles, which then can do a lot more damage. And then we have threaded blast, where destroying a tangle with a strand weapon creates a larger and more damaging explosion. So, I mean, that's like extended reach with more mind cells, right? And then the counter weave mod can also be very important, because you're going to be stunning a ton of champs in a lot of end game content. And so this will help you just constantly have all your abilities up in those activities as well. But I hope you did enjoy this video. Would you change this build at all? Let me know. Like I said, once I get that new hunter helmet, let me see what it's called real quick. Once I get the facade, I will also probably try to incorporate this a little bit with that other fragment I talked about, just because this gives you woven mail, which is 60% damage resistance in PvE, which might be very helpful in those harder activities, but then you will lose the DPS of your Star Eater skills as well. So I'll probably have both builds ready to go based on whatever activity I'm in. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like rating and to share it with your friends. Please subscribe. We're on the road to 100,000 subscribers. I hope you're enjoying Lightfall as much as I am, and have a fantastic day.